Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it may be, wherever you are. Welcome to the Literary Love Book Club live show for What Hunger by Catherine Day. Before we check the comments and get started, I want to introduce all of you to Vivian Asimos of Incidental Mythology. I'm going to let Vivian tell you all a little bit about herself.
Hi. So I am an anthropologist focusing on popular culture and mythology. And yeah, over on Incidental Mythology, which is both a YouTube channel as well as a Substack, I basically analyze popular culture as I would Greek myth or Norse myth and kind of see what it is that we're learning and doing and what our culture is saying through that. So that's what I do.
So you need to subscribe to Vivian and Incidental Mythology and do that on YouTube, and make sure also to subscribe to her Substack. And I'm going to have her links down in the description box below so that you can find her. So I first encountered Vivian on YouTube, and I enjoyed watching her video essays, and I enjoy watching her vlog where she shows you how she kind of comes up with her ideas and how she puts them into practice. And then she put an article up recently on Substack about looking at the Gothic through an anthropological lens. And I was fascinated by that. And I thought she'd be the perfect co host for What Hunger. So I'm glad she agreed to join. And we just talked to each other for the first time 30 minutes before the show. And I already like her. So you all should like
Oh,
her too.
I like you.
Yay. So lots of love today. We are going to go ahead and say hello to everyone in the comments now. Hello, Stuart. How are you today? I'm so glad you're here. Stuart left a really good review of What Hunger over on my Discord. So be sure you check that out. And thank you for reading along, Stuart. He is a faithful follower of Literary Love Book Club, and I always appreciate his insights. And we have Stina. Hello, Stina. How are you today? Stina is the woman who hooked me up with dryad teas, which I'm now obsessed with. So, all the love for Stina. Then we have Eleanor. It's wonderful to see you, Eleanor. Eleanor is a very kind, supportive person. She is always cheering me on, and she's so gracious, and she offers great insight. She also does incredible journaling. So it's wonderful to see you here, Eleanor. I'm so glad you are joining us. Hello, Blob the Blue. This is my son, who he no longer lives at home. He's a grown man now. He's a whopping 23 years old. So Joshua, thank you for being here. I know you're my number one fan, not in a Annie Wilkes kind of way. I'm just glad that you're here, and I'm glad that as many times as I may have messed up parenting, that I somehow still raised a wonderful son who still loves me. I love you. Thank you for being my number one fan. Thank you, Stuart. I just appreciate you. I'm just full of love for all of you today, which is a good thing, right? It's good to have community. Sometimes this is one thing Vivian and I talked about. Sometimes it feels like talking or screaming into the void. But community is everything.
That
And
was that was just that was so cute.
I
Oh,
love my people. I
you
do.
guys are so wonderful.
This is a wonderful community. I will tell you, if you are looking for like genuine, true community, I am very, very blessed to have this community here. So now we are going to dig into this novel because I have been craving this discussion for quite some time. And if if you see any blood or hear any screams, just ignore that. Just ignore it, and just move on. So now we are going to quickly do the non-spoiler section. So let me see if I can get the right banner up, because we never know if I'm going to get it right or not. We really don't. So I do this every other month, but I feel like it's my first time every time. So now we're going to do just a little bit of a story synopsis. Why is it like that? I wanted to scroll on the bottom. It's a me problem. We'll just take the scrolling one away and we'll just leave this up. It doesn't have to scroll.
It works.
Yes. But I want that other one to go. There we go. So the story synopsis. So this is a coming of age novel where we follow Veronica, or Ronnie for short. She is a Vietnamese American teenager who is navigating devastating loss, familial conflict, and an insatiable appetite for raw meat after she experiences an SA. So content warning for that. If you've read the novel, you know it happens, but I still like to just go ahead and put that out front, that it does contain that. That is the instigating event that spurs Veronica on to her insatiable appetite for the raw meat. And so now I want to give a little bit of an author bio. Of course, that one's going to scroll, so let me take that out. So Catherine Dang, she had her debut novel in 2021, and it was titled Nice Girls. And I have not read that, but after reading What Hunger, I did add it to my list. So just a little brief summary of what Nice Girls is about. Mary used to be such a nice girl. She was the resident whiz kid of Liberty Lake, Minnesota, the quiet, chubby teen with a scholarship to an Ivy League school. But 3 years later, Ivy League Mary is back, a thinner, cynical, restless failure who was kicked out of Cornell at the beginning of her senior year and won't tell anyone why. Taking a job, can't even talk today. Taking a job at the local grocery store, Mary tries to make sense of her life's sharp downward spiral. So, to me, just from that synopsis, it seems like there are some similar themes with a focus on a young woman who is spiraling in one way or another. So, now a little bit about Catherine Dang herself. She graduated from the University of Minnesota, and she currently resides in Brooklyn. And I'm going to let Vivian talk about an anthropological context, but I will briefly say that whenever COVID was taking place, that Catherine Dang was staying with her parents, and her mother actually told her some stories about Vietnamese immigrants that play into the novel itself. So now I'm going to go ahead and put up that spoiler reminder too, so that we can talk freely. And Vivian, you can go ahead and share that anthropological context, because there may be some spoilers there.
I was telling Jen before we started that because I specialize in pop culture, I don't get to talk about cannibalism as much as I would like. I'm currently in the middle of a big study on Taylor Swift, and so cannibalism doesn't come up as often as I would probably like it to in the discussion. So I was very excited to get into this, because to be honest, with cannibalism in particular is always such a wonderful topic for anthropologists to talk about. They are really really, it's a topic that they love to dance around, because it's just at the extreme borders of what is quote unquote acceptable by the typical white Western viewpoint, and by a lot of other viewpoints as well, but particularly from the anthropologists that are going somewhere. So when you encounter it, it's like this sudden shock to the system. And when you are supposed to be, embracing a community and trying to understand them, it can sometimes be quite a barrier for a lot of people. But it has been done. People have done a lot of studies on cannibalism. So I wanted to talk just about some of the various forms of cannibalism that pops up historically as well as culturally, because I saw basically all three of them existing in this book, which I thought was fascinating. But the first one is obviously the one that I think we all know, which is like the survivalist cannibalism. So this is like the story that actually happened for one of our characters where, she's stranded on an island and she has to actually eat human flesh in order to be able to live. That was kind of what was necessary to survive. But there's another two forms. One of them is called endo-cannibalism, and the other one is exo-cannibalism, because it's really important about how it's determined in relation to the community group. So endo is within the community group. So you don't eat outside of it. You only eat people within your community, and it's typically a process of grief. So somebody dies naturally, you don't kill them, but someone dies, and part of the funerary practice is that you eat their body. And the idea of it is that you are consuming part of their spirit. They are able to live within you. You take aspects of their personhood with you, parts of them that you like, and you try to carry forward. It's actually a really, at risk of sounding terrible, it is a very beautiful practice. But then there is also exo-cannibalism, which is when you consume the body of your enemy. So whenever, say, two clans are at war and you succeed over one of them, then you would consume their body as a way of kind of a demonstration of strength and power over them. It's a kind of, I hate to use the word ritual because people overuse it, but it's kind of that. It's more of a demonstration, a show, a performance of it, and it's a way of conquering the enemy. And what I love about this book is all three of these forms of cannibalism is present. So obviously we have the story of survival cannibalism, but then we also have her literally trying to eat those who have wronged her, her enemies. She wants to consume them because of the fact that they are exo, they are outside. But then there's Tommy. And while she doesn't want to eat Tommy, I think the grief over Tommy and her wanting to emulate him and take him into her is definitely present in the text. And so I love the fact that there is this consuming love, consuming anger and hate and warrior anger, and then also the consuming for just survival. So I was very excited about it.
That was fascinating. Thank you. I love that you could find those three examples in this book. This book really is doing so much. Going into it, I didn't expect it to have as many layers as it does. It is just such a, such a perfect book for discussion. We do need to go back to do the ratings because I forgot about those.
No.
Now that we've kind of let the spoiler out of the bag, I'm not, I don't keep the spoiler banner up the whole time because it's very big and kind of obnoxious. So spoilers ahead. So let's talk about ratings now. So Vivian, how did you rate this book?
I don't know how you work, but I'm a very forgiving rater when it comes to books. I don't know why people are stingy with 5 stars. If you love a book, you give it 5 stars. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars.
It was, my initial rating was 4 stars, but I feel like I'm going to go ahead and bump it up to 5. I really, because I can't really think of why I wouldn't have given it 5. Maybe because sometimes the writing felt a little bit juvenile, but it's a teenage girl, so what is that's when my my academia snobbery gets in the way sometimes, because it really, I felt, I will give it 5 stars too. So I'm going to check the comments before we move
Oh,
ahead.
yes, the transubstantiation I am obviously going to be talking about.
Yes,
I
that was
it was actually that's going to be in my favorite quotes, that whole section. I did anthropology of religion was my kind of entry point. So as soon as they were going to a Catholic church, and I was like, of course they're going to be doing this. I would argue that that's a form of endo cannibalism, technically, but I'm sure a lot of some Catholics might not enjoy being roped into that same category.
I will say I am excited to get to that part of the discussion. I am a former Catholic turned atheist, which a lot of my followers know. So I have a background in it, but I no longer believe. So I cannot wait till we get to that part. 5 stars.
Woo!
Yes. 4.5. Very nice. 4 stars. Good. I love to see that. I love when we can enjoy it. Because sometimes the books we read for a book club I have read before, but not always. And this was a first time read for me. So you kind of you don't know, when you're going into it. So now we will move on to our characters. Um, and this is just kind of a little brief part because, like I was telling Vivian before we went live, a lot of times aspects of the characters we'll talk about more when we get to some of the themes and the symbolism and other elements. But Veronica, I felt very real, I felt like she was a relatable character, even though clearly I am not Vietnamese, but I have been a teenage girl, and I felt like she was very realistic in that way. There was the part where she was getting ready to go to the party and she was noticing the acne on her face and everything else wrong with her. And she was like, I can't, I'm disgusting. I'm not going anywhere. Like I'm paraphrasing, but I mean, hell, I do that now. I do that, I still do that. And I'm 51 years old. And just it's a constant thing. I think a lot of women, I won't say all because some women don't, but I feel like a lot of women or people who present as women have that struggle that of not being beautiful enough. I think about that scene in The Substance, for those of you who've seen that, where Demi Moore's character is in front of the mirror and she's stunning, but she's like wiping off her makeup and just like, so I felt like she was relatable. I felt a lot of empathy for her. She's in that difficult age of, she's leaving middle or junior or however, you may term it where you are, school and moving into high school. So that was something else that struck me too, as this summer being a very liminal space because she's between middle school and high school, and then she's between the world of childhood and adulthood. And she even talks about being too old for cartoons but too young for work. And I mean, most of us probably felt that at that age. And then her rage that we'll talk about more. Was there anything you wanted to say about Veronica before we move on, Vivian?
Yeah, I mean, I really liked her. I also liked that she was somebody who didn't like. I think sometimes when people write like the feisty female teenager, it's often the person who will yell first and stuff. And I like that she kind of internalized everything because I'm somebody that internalizes everything and then will just blow up at like the weirdest, smallest inconvenience. So I did like I really related to her again, even though I'm not Vietnamese. I do have immigrant family, so there were some aspects, even though it's a very different kind of immigrant, it's still some of that is still there in the background. They approached immigration a very different way, but also in a very similar way as well. I was never taught the language and things like that, so there was a distancing. So I really understood where all of this was coming from, and I loved the way she reacted to things because it felt very real and relatable and not fiction, you know?
I agree. And yeah, she was somebody that immediately, like, I felt like you could feel compassion for. she is a likable character, which I like unlikable characters
Mm.
too. They're also fun. But I feel like in a novel like this, it was necessary for us to I think like her. Yeah, very, very relatable. And then we have Tommy. So Tommy, again, he's on that cusp of a different sort of time period. He's leaving high school, going to college, which is a very difficult time. It's exciting, but it's scary. And so he's already distancing himself from his parents, and that's been something that's happening over time. But I feel that because he knows he's about to leave the house, he is holding nothing back in his debates with his father. And
Which
we'll
just
talk about.
happens, doesn't it? When you get
Yes.
18, you just start, I mean, you've been through it on both sides, I guess.
Yes. Yes. You've got that necessary pulling away, because you know you're going to have to stand on your own. And so you start doing that, yeah, before you leave the house. And there was just so much, because that happens even in families who don't have an immigrant situation, or people who are coming from a a traumatic past, like we find out more and more as the novel goes on, that Veronica and Tommy's parents are coming from that. But it just added that layer of conflict. And and something else I noticed about Tommy was like the kind of like foreshadowing, like he knew something, even at the very beginning of the novel. He's talking about how it feels like a roller coaster, like you're coming to the top and you're just waiting for something. So whenever that part was there, like I didn't know what kind of family tragedy was going to happen, but going into it, there's a family tragedy. It's in the synopsis. So I immediately thought that Tommy's probably going to be the one who dies, and that's probably what the situation is. And then there was another part, I think maybe even on the first page, where Tommy is just kind of staring at the highway. Which, is kind of, it could be read either way. Like he's staring at the highway, like I'm ready to go, I'm ready to escape. But also, the highway is going to be where, he does go, but not in the way that he thought. And then also, Tommy says whenever he and Veronica find that squirrel in the cage where their neighbors have been trapped in the squirrel, Tommy says to Veronica that the squirrel would rather die than be in a cage. And I felt like that's Tommy's own saying about himself. He wants out of this cage. And we also find out something about Tommy later on too that would also make him feel like he doesn't want to exist if he can't exist as who he really is. So we'll talk about that more too. Did you have anything about Tommy that you wanted to say, Vivian, or anybody in the comments?
Yeah, I mean, I loved that. I think his death also really showed how much Ronnie really relied on him, that despite the age difference, because I think it was like three years or so, which
Mm-hmm.
for when you're of that age can feel huge. But the fact that they had each other even then, and maybe living in the same room, really helped with that. But they obviously had normal sibling bickerings, but yet she knew he would have her back. And it's kind of one of her breaking points is, I don't have him anymore. I don't have the person who would protect me. I don't have the person who would fight for me. What am I supposed to do? Because that was who he was. And you can kind of see that even in the flashbacks, as well as in that, beginning, he's always there for her as well.
Yeah. And then May, she, a lot of the times, like I noticed she had that very traditional gender role. There were so many times Veronica talked about the way her mom was doing the cooking or the cleaning. Her mom really didn't want to talk or interact with a lot of people. She would rather be busy in the kitchen, busy doing those kind of things. Uh, but there was a quiet strength to May. And again, we'll talk more about that later, about we find out just how much strength is in resilience are within her. Anything else about May that you wanted to mention?
I love the brown bathrobe.
Right. Yes. Yes. Such a, a way that she coped with grief. Just not quite coping, really, just kind of hiding, which is very understandable too.
Yeah.
And Ba, he was a difficult character. I did not care very much for him at the beginning and throughout a lot of it. But again, when I got to the end and I understood more about him, I could give him more grace. And I like that too because I always appreciate when a novel does not make characters flat or two dimensional. These felt like authentic, real characters, complex characters. Ba wasn't just this, you know, mean dad who's always harsh and just, won't listen to anybody. He was wrong about a lot of things, but we understand why. And I really appreciated getting that aspect of him. And I think most of the other things I want to say about Bob will come later. What about you, Vivian, or anybody in the comments?
I didn't really come around on him. I did. I mean, I think he felt, again, I think all the characters felt very real in their presentation. And even though his past was revealed and it was understandable, I still didn't like him. I still didn't agree with him. But I think there was a certain amount of, you saw him changing just a tiny bit by the end. Like you said, he never admitted that he was wrong, but then at the end he admits that he bought a shitty pizza.
Yeah.
And that's like that small crack of like, okay, I guess he can admit that he bought a bad pizza, and that was enough to at least show at least a little. I guess that's the amount of character growth he gets.
Right. Yeah, admitted to, which I had to laugh at that part about the pizza because, again, that just showed how much May took care of things like that because he couldn't even order a pizza. He didn't even know. So he just like had to put everything on it. And I also laughed just because Veronica said that pizza was the one Western food that her parents liked. And I'm like, you know what? I know some people don't like pizza, but for the most part, I feel like pizza is like the universal food. Everybody likes a pizza. You might want different stuff on it. You wouldn't want everything on it, clearly. But I really I loved that. Yeah, that was me too. Like I didn't quite know what to think of her. There were times I wanted her to say something, say something, quit just, hanging back, do something, say something. But then we get that resilience and that strength with her at the end. Yeah, that helped me understand him. Like Vivian said, I'm not sure I ever really liked him, but I could give him more grace toward the end than I could at the beginning. Yeah. Yeah, because I can't imagine not, I just, I, I don't even like to think about what kind of experiences he had. Right. Some people don't. I do know some people who don't like it.
I don't get that. I wouldn't be friends with anybody who says they don't like pizza.
That's a deal breaker. Yeah,
there's something wrong with you.
Yes. We still love you if you don't like pizza. Or you don't like pizza. We just don't understand you. We don't understand. And then finally a little bit about Kome or Mai, the aunt. I did not like her at first. She just breezes in and she's got, she's from California and they have all the best things and, all the, wonderful things. But I did like her more when we got to the end because she was not hiding the past, which Bay and Ma had hidden from Tommy and Veronica. But Komai, I didn't like her her attitude sometimes. I didn't like the way that she went about things, but I did like that she was upfront about so many things. She pissed me off though when she was talking about May and May's past and the money in Vietnam, which was nothing we knew about until that point, because that was obviously something May wanted to keep quiet, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I did appreciate Komai being there for Veronica, even when Veronica didn't like her at first, but when it was time for her aunt to leave, then she didn't really want her to go. And maybe that's because they had bonded a little bit and Komai had brought her clothes, or maybe it was because, like Veronica did say, as long as Komai was there was a little bit of structure to the family. And then when she left again, it was just going to be Veronica with her parents who were processing grief in very different ways. Do you have any thoughts about Aunt Komai, Vivian, or anybody
Yeah,
in the chat?
I couldn't tell if I liked her or not when she first came on. She reminded me a lot of my stepmom. I probably shouldn't say, but but it did. She has a similar kind of really strong out there personality that kind of brags a lot. But I think what I learned from both her and Komai is that often those kinds of personalities are hiding some other stuff under the surface. And I think Komai was at least better at being honest about those things. I think speaking about the past meant that she was very honest about, look, this is where I came from and it wasn't what I have now. And that's why I like what I have now, and all of those kinds of things, which I appreciated. And she was really annoying about her son, but I think that's sometimes nice, I guess. I guess that shows that she liked him.
Yeah, she's very proud of her son for sure. And sometimes that could feel too like, uh, I don't know that she was really throwing it in their faces, and I know it wasn't intentional, but it felt like maybe not something she should keep talking about, considering that Tommy, you know, their son had just been
Yeah.
killed. So maybe some of it was a little bit of insensitivity.
She seems like she just wasn't aware of how she was coming across more than somebody who's doing it on purpose
Mhm.
for. And I do like that. I think she could pick up on the fact that something had happened to Ronnie, but not sure what it was, and so was trying to be there, even if it was in a really annoying fashion. I think she at least picked up on it in a way that the parents didn't, because they were too busy with their own grief to be able to pay attention to it.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. So let's check our comments and then we'll get into some things. Yeah, she did. I agree. Like we said, coming in, she was very abrasive, and I was like, this woman is just too much. But then you do begin to understand more about her and see that she is there for Veronica. Exactly. I like that too. Because they were so more, so much more complex than just, a good person and a bad person. So I did appreciate that too. So now we will go ahead and talk about some themes and symbolism and elements. So we take our character off and swap us over to the next part, everyone. So one of the themes is wartime trauma, but I feel like I did put that first on the outline, but I think we may cover that a little bit more toward the end if that sounds good to you, Vivian, and maybe start off with the intergenerational cultural conflict.
That's fair. I think that goes off of talking about the family a lot. Flows
Yeah,
very well, I think.
I think so. So one of the things, definitely that tension that we talked about a little bit when we talked some about the characters a while ago, the tensions between Tommy and his father, and their rivalry that's especially ramped up because of Tommy's being like on the cusp of leaving for college. And there were so many layers of conflict, generational conflict, American culture versus Vietnamese culture, sexism, language and arguments, and what a swear word was. Like, on page 22, that whole, like, it's page 22 in my version, that whole exchange, when Veronica says at the dinner table, she's telling Tommy to take a shower, and she's like, I don't smell like Satan's ass crack. And her father tells her, not to be vulgar, that word is, or that phrase is disgusting for a girl to say. So there you've got, that whole sexism, like, oh, a woman shouldn't be saying those kind of words. And then Tommy defends Veronica, saying she can say what she wants. And then, he says, in America, it's called freedom of speech. You're infringing on it. So Tommy's like just throwing it, in Boss face. This is America. You came here. So now now you're gonna, you just have to deal with this freedom of speech. And then he tells his dad not to be sexist. And then his dad's like, oh, you think you're so smart because you know big English words. And the whole, the whole thing, stupid's not a swear word. And then Jesus, it's a word, is what Tommy says. And his dad's like, don't use Jesus's name in vain. So there's so much contained in that one conversation. The conflict between father and son, that's generational, the cultural conflict, the, sexism, religious, all of that. So I felt like that short conversation encapsulated a lot of the tension between Tommy and his father. What do you think, Vivian?
I had flagged page 74 in my copy on this topic, which was when she's American. That's how they eat. They all love their salt and sugar and cheese. And then Tommy and I were always lumped together as the Americans in the family, especially when it came to the food we ate. It was an insult that I couldn't understand why. And she goes into the fact that it's like, we're only eating what you give us, like we're children. Like we can't go more than that. And I think there is a certain tension of this in a lot of immigrant families, particularly to certain regions of America, where as we all know right now, especially, it is not good to be seen as an immigrant. And so you try to become as American as possible, but then you get almost resentful of the fact that your children don't have that knowledge or that care or that culture, and you feel that depth, but it is kind of your doing but also not your doing. And it is such a complicated issue that is existent in that. And I think feeling it from the child's side of like, I'm only doing what you're giving me, but also still feeling that depth, like when all the family's there and she can't understand Vietnamese while they're all speaking around her, but she never was taught it. But then they kind of look down on her for not knowing it. And it's just so complicated and interesting. And I think the name Veronica is quite interesting as well, which we didn't talk too much about when we talked about the characters, but the fact that their names are Veronica and Tommy, which are very American names. My family did that. They were originally Greek. So I was named after my aunt, whose original name was Vasiliki Asimokopoulos. So I am Vivian Asimos now, which is so like they Americanize it in order to make it easier for the other people to say and to accumulate to it. And Vivian's a much more American name, so you can understand it a bit better, but then you miss all of these other aspects to it. So that particular scene to me really stood out as encapsulating that complicated tension, but without it blowing up, where it's almost the resentfulness on both sides that isn't really anybody's fault, really. Well, I mean, it's American culture's anti-immigration fault, but that's
Right.
nobody involved.
Right. That's a fascinating concept that you bring up, because too, it just to me also explains more about May and Ba too, that they're dealing with guilt and fear, guilty because they can't maybe teach their children Vietnamese or have their children, you know, quite as immersed in Vietnamese culture as they wish they could because they're afraid, which we see throughout the novel. Bay and Ma wanting to hide themselves, and they say things like, "Don't, don't get arrested. Don't, don't stand out. Don't
Mhm.
look different." And it's a necessary thing, unfortunately, for them to protect their children in that way. But I would have to imagine they feel guilty because they have to do it. They wanted a better life here, and when they got here in the United States, they found out that this better life may not be what they'd hoped it would be. And it's very unfortunate, like something Vivian and I talked about before we went on, that this is all too relevant today in the United States. That it is a dangerous time to be an immigrant. So I felt like that was something that's still here, unfortunately. Something else too that really brought up this intergenerational and cultural conflict, is Tommy talking to his dad about the war in Afghanistan. And Tommy says to his dad, they don't really want us over there. And his dad's like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's easy to run your mouth when you're safe in this house. I'd like to see you walk up to a communist, you'd piss through your pants. And then Tommy says, I'm not stupid. I'd lie and pretend I was one of them. And then his dad says, oh, acting like a coward. And then Tommy's like, I wouldn't want to die for a lost cause. And his dad's like, you don't think the war was worth it? And then Tommy says that the war was a government that most Viet people didn't care about. Only the Catholics and the rich cared. And he said a lot of people got pulled in and it was a wasted time and a wasted war. And, you know, I, I I understand Tommy's saying that. I mean, obviously, the Vietnam War was very much protested against, for good reason. But if you're coming from Ba's side, you saw a side that Tommy never could have seen. Um, and then the dad the dad tells Tommy too, and this is getting into something else that we'll go ahead and talk about now with Tommy. Um, his dad says the army doesn't want your kind crazy in the head,
Mm.
not normal like the rest of us, diseased. So that's another conflict that Tommy has with his parents. And it's really never spoken outright in the family, which I feel like is just another secret, but it becomes clear as we go through the novel that Tommy was gay and he was having a relationship with somebody that we'll talk about later that plays an important factor. But it also reminds me of going back to when Tommy, like I mentioned earlier, talks about a squirrel being in the cage, that it would rather die than stay trapped there. So I don't know. I know clearly Veronica did not know this about her brother. And she finds out in the novel. I don't know whether May knew or not, but it was a very coded way that the dad said that. And I definitely hated the dad at that part. Um, and I don't know how Vietnamese culture responds to the LGBTQ community. I should have looked that up. I don't know. Um, but even now, and I would say especially now in the United States, especially for the T part of the LGBTQ community, it's a very dangerous time. I don't know if the dad, I'm sure part of it was fear, like he didn't want his son to be a target when he was already a target for being Vietnamese in the United States, but I still cannot give his dad any grace for that comment. And it's just a lot of conflict added on the other conflict. So what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, it felt like in that scene that you were reading from where, he's saying that that comment about crazy in the head, not normal like the rest of us. It feels like Tommy wants him to say it. That's at least what I kind of read in it, was that because he leans across the table and he says, why are you saying that? And Boss still won't say it. And I think there's a certain amount of like, if he just said it, maybe it could mend something, but he refuses. He just hints at it, and that's the most he can do. But the fact that, I think Tommy kind of just, he didn't care if they liked it or not. He just wanted them to say it, and they wouldn't say it. But for some reason, Tommy wouldn't say it either.
Right. Yeah, it's just the shame and the having to keep the secret. And we find out Tommy sneaks out later on. We find out, why he's sneaking out to meet a young man that he's involved with. And that just added so much more of a sad layer to everything. It's already a sad story, but that to me made it even more gut wrenching. I'll check our comments now. Yeah. Yeah. Probably keep talking about the things, right? They didn't want other people to understand that coded language. Yeah. Yeah. It seems, now that we're talking about it, to be a fairly common way that people handle that.
Yeah, and obviously for for Swedish and for Greek, it was at least somewhat easy to pretend that you weren't an immigrant, because we're white, so you're able to kind of try to meld in, as long as you don't speak another language, as long as you don't look too different, or you stand out in some way that people ask questions, then you can kind of assimilate and meld in. While obviously, being a Vietnamese family, there's a lot more of a visual difference, that you don't have that ability to kind of hide in it in the same way.
And I even remember one part in the novel where Veronica's mother tells her to come inside because she's being in the sun too long, and she says, "You're getting dark."
Yeah.
So it's like, she wants to not let her daughter, have as dark of a complexion. And there's other parts too where a Vietnamese woman is being described. I don't remember what the context is, but she's being described, and it says, "Oh, she was so beautiful. She was fair skinned." And I'm like, you see that, dynamic even within that culture. And that was something else. I thought, well, that is, that is sad to hear. Then I was looking at some of my other notes. Also, something else I thought too with that intergenerational and cultural conflict is Tommy and Veronica are getting what, their parents don't really talk a lot about it, except to say some of the negative things that Boss said about, you wouldn't want to walk up to a communist and that kind of thing. So they have this idea of Vietnam as being a terrible place. But when the aunt comes, then she starts talking about the beautiful aspects of it and missing certain things. And, it's like Tommy and Veronica only had this one view, but they didn't have the opportunity to know about all of the good things, which I felt like would have been important for them to know too, because that's part of their parents, part of their culture. And they're not really getting to find out those things. And I think that's something.
It's hard though, isn't it? Like, I mean, I'm currently an immigrant myself right now, so I live in the UK. And sometimes it's easier to play up when I'm talking to my husband, who's English, about all of the things in America that I really, really don't like and I really, really hated, because it makes it easier to be far away from family, because being far away from the things that formed my childhood, there are so many things that he's never going to be able to know about my life growing up that I'm able to see in his, because I can go to his hometown. I can sit in his childhood bedroom, and he's never going to really be able to do that with me. And those intimate things that you get from a person. So it's just almost easier to say, no, it sucks. Oh, it's just terrible, and not talk about the things that actually weren't that bad.
And I think that's a like a painful thing too, because it it brings up the things they left behind, which, they left in search of a better life. But I don't think it's ever an easy, obviously never an easy decision, especially when you find out, like, coming over on the fishing boats, and we'll talk about that and
Hmm.
some of the horrors that they experienced. Two, this also kind of gets into the next one a little bit with the food as a cultural memory, but just the part where Veronica can't roll the egg rolls. She's never been taught. And then Komai is like, oh, these American kids, they're soft. They don't know how to do these things. And it's not really Veronica's fault. Her mother hasn't taught her that. Her mother likes to be the one that's taking care of all the food prep. So that was just another aspect I thought about. But I think now we can move into more so of the food as being a cultural memory, and the meat as being both a luxury and a danger. Um, I've kind of thought about that just briefly with the constant recalls of foods in the United States. Don't eat the lettuce, you'll get something real nasty. Egg recalls for salmonella, jalapeno peppers recall. I mean, just so many things. But for, you know, back to the novel, the meat as being both this luxury and this danger. And I didn't really quite understand the danger part of the meat until we got to the end. I can understand meat being more of a luxury because meat can be very expensive. Um, but of course, we find out that meat was a symbol of, and I maybe should have put this together, but I didn't. Meat was a symbol of wealth. So in Vietnam, when you had the communist takeover and they were taking, people's land and other aspects, like, you did not want to appear to have money. And if you had meat, then you appeared to have money. You wanted to protect yourself from the communists, but you were wanting to protect yourself from other people, who would see your meat as a source of wealth and try to take it. And then Komai was talking about how much they missed their meat, and that some people turned to eating dogs or cats or rats just so they could have that meat. And so I hadn't really thought about meat in that sense. And then of course that will tie into other kinds of meat that we'll talk about too. But what were your thoughts? Did you know beforehand the idea of meat being dangerous? Did you put that together, or is it just me that was like
Well,
dumb?
well, there was a specific book we were talking about right before we went live that it's one of my absolute favorite anthropologists, historical anthropologists in this world, which is her name is Mary Douglas. She was also one of the first female in kind of Western anthropology, and she was amazing and wonderful and wrote so many cool things. Anyway, but she wrote this book called Purity and Danger, which is all about the food rules as well as rules in general of what makes something pure and what makes something impure, what makes something dangerous, what makes something not dangerous in terms of a lot of ritual stuff and things like that. She has an entire chapter on the Israeli food laws and particularly the abominable pig. Highly suggest at least that chapter, if nothing else. I'm sure I have a copy of it somewhere if anyone wants to read it, but it's so good. But basically, she has a phrase in this book that is it's my favorite phrase in all of anthropology, which is dirt is matter out of place. So basically, the idea is that we're going to talk about dirt for a second, but we'll get there. But basically, the idea is that, like, if I invited everyone here to go to a picnic where I live here, and we went out to, there's like a nice green in front of the cathedral, really beautiful, wonderful, and we laid out the picnic blanket and we sat down. And then Jen looked around and said, it's really dirty here. We'd all think that she was crazy. because of course it's dirty here. We're on the grass. We're on the ground. That's how it is. It's not dirty. We're just outside. If we then went to my house and you sat in my kitchen and there was dirt all over the floor, and then Jen said, "Man, it's really dirty in here," we'd all go, "Yeah, it is." Because the idea is that dirt belongs outside. It doesn't belong inside. So as soon as the dirt moves to a different location where it shouldn't be, it is out of place, it becomes dirty. And so she then applies this theory and this rule to basically everything that is considered impure and unclean and dangerous for consumption and for involvement, because it is out of place. And so it was really fascinating hearing all of these, reading this with all of this stuff about food. And of course, food and anthropology goes hand in hand. Food is a really important way of cultural meaning and storytelling. As a study mythology, I could do an entire mythology of just food and how food works as storytelling. I'm sure I have somewhere. But yeah, so when you involve that into it as well, of how certain meat is considered okay and certain meat isn't okay, and in what context is that meat okay and what context is it not, and that we draw these lines, and these lines are often just cultural lines. The fact that we don't eat dog here is a cultural line that we have just drawn, and it is based on the category that we have put a dog in. Dog belongs to family. It doesn't belong to outside of family, while a cow is outside of family. I'm sure for some people, cows are family, and maybe they have a very tricky understanding of how the meat suddenly fits because of our categorical systems. So I loved all of this stuff, especially the scene where she's dipping. Was she eating pho, where she had the raw meat and was putting it in the broth, and then started just eating the raw meat, and everyone reacting bad? But like, as I'm a vegetarian, so the idea of sticking raw meat in a broth and expecting that to cook it enough for you to then consume is wild to me. But it clearly, that's the meat goes in the broth. It doesn't go into your mouth at that point. It's these kind of rules that you establish with it. So anyway, I had a fun time. I think every one of the flags that I had was all food references throughout the text.
Yes, it was such
so much food. And again, I'm a vegetarian, and yet I found myself being like, "Oh, that sounds really good," even though it was like, it was meat and sometimes human meat, and yet it was still like.
Listen, I feel the same. Like when I read this, or when I read some of the books we'll talk about at the end, or when I not when I read any of the novels, but when I watched the movies, but when I watched the television series Hannibal, and he was preparing his food, I was like, that looks so good. Not that I would want to eat it, but I mean, he presents it beautifully too. So yeah. And I was thinking about that too, because I used to, well, technically my daughter used to have a pet pig, and I have a friend now who has a pet pig, but people don't think twice about, eating pork, for the most part, unless obviously if you're Jewish or another culture that wouldn't eat it. But for most, people around here where I am in Alabama, they eat pork all the time. Not, I don't, but a lot of people do. So let's see. Eleanor says she enjoyed the descriptions of the Vietnamese food. Yeah, the cooking, the interacting. Yeah, so much centered on the food. Yeah, I really feel like we could write a thesis or a dissertation about the food in this novel, or at least a chapter of it. Because
you could do a whole thesis on this. This is.
Yeah, colorism and Asian narratives. Yeah, we read about it too, in African American narratives sometimes. And I note whenever my husband and I were in China in 2009 to adopt our daughter, there were signs in department stores that were advertising, certain makeup and stuff to make you have more fair skin. So I saw it like real life there, and I was just like, I don't, that's something I don't understand. but it does exist. Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah, it depends on, what the context is, but here, like you said, Stuart, it did play such an important role of, how the family interacted and the different kinds of food that they ate. And something I noticed too, was that when the 4th of July scene, and that's at the beginning. I think that's like the first thing that's happening.
Mm.
Um, I noticed they talked about having barbecue, but I was wondering, I know like a traditional dish that people have, here in the United States on the 4th of July, if you celebrate it, is barbecue. But I wasn't sure if they were having what we would consider like American barbecue or if it was a different type of barbecue. But I'm not sure. But I was thinking if it was what we typically, would think of down here, for that time, it would be like another way they've kind of assimilated a little bit, into the culture here, because a lot of the book too was so much about heritage and assimilation. What are we holding on to from our culture, and at the same time we're having to assimilate into this culture so we don't stand out. And
Well,
then I put the title of that book in the chat.
well, and like we were talking about how my camera keeps doing this. I'm very sorry. But
It's
um,
haunted.
I'm a ghost now. I have ascended. But basically, we were talking about how they kind of gave gifts of food as a way of reconciling. So like when they gave the stuff that was left in Tommy's car, and it was an almond joy, which was his gift to say sorry essentially to Ba, and then Ba had gotten banh mi's from his favorite place. But it was, what I also loved was that Ba had gotten a Vietnamese dish and Tommy had gotten an American food. So like even in their gifts of reciprocity, there is still this level of cultural difference within it, that it is an American food reaching out and a Vietnamese food reaching out as part of the clash. So even like in those small things, it's still feeding into these larger narratives. And when she was talking about the fun money that they would save all the coins for, and they would go get basically like fast food and the deluxe meals with the extra, with the sides, with the drinks and candy bars and cookies from the nice cafe, like it's all American food that they would be able to go out and spend their own little pocket fun money on. That even in those small like cute moments of her with Tommy, there's still food. So
Yes. I didn't think about that aspect of it. We talked about, and I appreciated the way, not that it's the healthy way to do it, but the way that the dad, he wasn't going to say the words "I'm sorry," but he bought the banh mi that he knew Tommy would like. And then Tommy, he was not going to say I'm sorry to his dad, but he bought the almond joy. But I hadn't thought about what you just said about the dad giving Tommy something that's Vietnamese, and then Tommy giving the dad something,
mm.
that's American. That is such a cool insight. I love it. Then another aspect of the food as culture, and just across different cultures, I was like, oh, this is good stuff. When Ronnie gets that filet mignon and she's eating it by herself in the woods, I've just got to read that passage because I went back and reread that probably 10 times because I was like, just damn, this is amazing. There was something a bit savage about cutting up an animal and then eating its innards. And this is on page 146 in my copy, if I didn't say that. But that was how we'd done it. That was how we'd survived as a species in our different corners of the earth, no matter how hot or cold our surroundings, no matter how much or how little there was to eat. For the billions of people who existed and who had once existed, meat was a means of survival. It was culture and it was heritage. And for me, it was Vietnamese. As a species, we didn't just scarf down our meat and shit it out right after. Some of us showed gratitude to the animals. The Native Americans ate the meat and used up the rest of the parts as a resource. Farmers in Japan massaged their nicest cows and made them listen to jazz music. Other people had specific ways they prepared their meats passed down from generation to generation. And we ate meat as we dined together, enjoying each other's presence during holidays and simple meals. There was purpose in even eating a single slice of turkey in a sandwich. It was to keep us alive. I thought that was beautiful. And I was like, that just encapsulates so much of that theme of food as being cultural in the ways different cultures prepare and consume meat, or don't consume meat, depending on their proclivities for the kind of food they eat. um does anybody have any other comments or thoughts?
Well, while we're on it, I'll talk about the transubstantiation. Just a
Yes,
real
yes.
quick. I won't spend too long on it because I mean it could be like a whole 2-hour lecture in and of itself, but I won't subject you to it. But I distinctly remember my mom grew up Catholic, and in that age that Tommy was in, where you're trying to needle your parents and not even realizing you're doing it, but you try to needle your parents. I decided to tell her that it was cannibalism as a way of trying to upset her, and she just looked at me and went, yeah. I will always remember that. I'm just like, oh. So I did think about that, but again, this falls into the different kind of categories of different ways, and the type of cannibalism that isn't bad versus the cannibalism that is good, and all this kind of stuff. And I always like to talk about how Jesus is a monster because he functions as a monster, and the fact that he's between categories. He's both God and human, and yet we revere him, we love him. I mean, people do, I don't, but you know what I mean. Christians love him and adore him and all this stuff. But I wanted to read, it's going to be also my favorite quote, so I won't do it again, but I wanted to read a section on that. It's on page 114, where he says, on that altar, there was technically real flesh and blood, bits of arm and leg and ear and belly and buttocks and who knows what, jugs of dark spilt blood, and these bits of flesh and blood were from somebody people adored. When I really thought about it, it seemed so macabre. It was like a dark ritual that I would see in the movies performed by a cult of Satan worshippers, but I thought it was beautiful. And I also do think it's beautiful. There is, like I said, like there is something sometimes so beautiful about consuming out of love. I don't know if other people have the cute aggression thing where you just want to like bite into somebody, but I always joke around to my husband about when we're like cuddling and I go, I just want to eat you. Like I
Mm-hmm.
just I just want to eat you. Like there's just something about it, and I love that it kind of captured that love,
Mm-hmm.
and but yet also didn't shy away from the fact that yeah, this is transubstantiation is basically just okay cannibalism.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, anyway, I really loved that bit.
I did too. And when I was Catholic, I did find it like one of the most beautiful aspects of mass, the Eucharist. And I still, even though I'm not Catholic now, I still see the beauty in it. There are things I do miss about being Catholic, and participating in the Eucharist is one of the things. So even though, like I said, I am now consider myself an atheist, I still appreciate that. And I never felt like this was a horrible thing, to or a gross thing, and I still don't. But yeah, like you, I find some aspects beautiful. Even when you talked earlier about some cultures who consume the people they love after they die, I find that beautiful.
Mm.
I did. I'm not saying I would do that. It's not my culture, but I do see the beauty in it. And I know we usually I try to keep this to an hour, hour and a half, but
I'm
today
so
I don't.
sorry if it's because
No,
it
it's
feels
not
I'm
you.
talking
It's
so much
just too
about
much.
dirt being out of place. And
No, we are gonna keep going. So I understand if people have to go, that's fine. I forgot to mention at the beginning, if you're catching this on replay, thank you so much. Please in the comments let us know what you thought of it. But do you have to go at any certain time, Vivian?
no, I mean, it's 9 o'clock at night here, so I'm here until I go to bed. So
All
I'm
right.
good.
So I'm gonna keep going because we still have things to talk about. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about too is the family dynamics, and then as that relates to keeping secrets, how they process grief, how they cope with fear and anxieties, especially as related to the immigrant experience. I feel like we've talked about a lot of that already, but one of the things I noticed was the different ways that the family members processed grief. Um, Ba was angry when
Mm.
even when the officer came to the house to tell them that Tommy had been killed in the accident. Bob was yelling and he was angry and like saying you got the wrong family or the wrong house. And Bob turned to a lot of excessive drinking too to try to cope. So for him, there was a lot of anger. And then it also was made worse, I'm sure, by the last conversation he had with Tommy. They had that very heated argument and said some, bad things to each other. So he's angry, and then the drinking is like a self coping mechanism where he's trying to just, you know, kind of numb himself to what happened. And then May really isolating herself, constantly in the brown bathrobe. Just and brown is, I wear brown. I like brown sometimes, but in this context, to me, brown seems like that. It's not quite black. So it's more of just a sad color to me in this way. Just this brown, almost like wearing sackcloth back in the day. For mourning. So she really isolated and just kind of wanted to turn away from everybody. She wasn't going to the store. She didn't want to drive anymore, which is understandable. You go through that kind of experience. And then Ronnie was also angry in her own way. She turned a lot of it inward, and then she turned it outward. So, any thoughts about the family dynamics before we get into the female rage?
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered a lot of it within the food and the immigration and the um, trauma of it all and the way that they interacted with each other. Um, it all just felt very realistic to me, I think, which I think it can be sometimes hard to capture those complicated, nuancy feelings between multiple generations and to capture it in a way that feels very real but also very earnest and caring and empathetic, and I think she managed to do that quite well. So
There too. Let's see. Yeah,
yeah.
they really do. I do miss that. The ritual, the beauty, the reverence. I do. So now we will go on to first of all, again, I know I've given the warning, but content warning because we are about to talk about the SA. So Veronica has something to drink, which my gosh, I sure did as a teenager too. I plenty of times snuck out, drank, went to parties. And without going into details, I have been in a situation like Veronica was. And so that is always difficult for me to read. And depending on my mind, state of mind, I can read it or I can't. No, it also depends on how it's done. And I do appreciate the way it was done in this novel. You knew what happened, but you didn't have to get a like overly
Mm.
sensationalized look at it. Um, so just in my notes after or during the assault, when Ronnie bites off Michael's earlobe, I just put it was too bad she didn't bite off something else. But we'll just leave it at that. But just her way of fighting back and that triggering within her everything that she had to repress, everything her parents repressed, she just let it out. And the party takes place at the one who assaults her, his house. It's his older brother's party. We do find out that this older brother is the young man that Tommy was involved with, that he was sneaking out to see. So that adds just another dimension to the story. Um, is there anything that you wanted to say about the assault before we talk about the
No, I mean, I agree with you that I think the way it was described was, I was about to say nice, and that is not a word to use for what happened, but I also think it captured that feeling of being slightly out of sorts, and because it's told from her point of view, so obviously she wouldn't know the gritty details and the specific, because she wasn't fully there. And also when you recall trauma, it can also have that kind of vague, foggy feeling as well. So I think both of it combined, I think that helped to make it not too visceral. It also, but yeah, I cheered for a little bit. Good for
yeah,
you.
exactly. And then, really that hunger for the raw meat comes after that. And so she wants to lick the raw pork off her finger when she does, stick her fingers in the egg roll stuff. So that we know at that point that now she's got this taste for this. But something else too that also was very realistic and very difficult was the times that she would talk about feeling that pain between her legs, and then the next day, like she had blood on her underwear, which again, it's not extremely graphic, but it was there for an important reason, and just to let us know that just something happens once, but it's not over mentally, and it's not over physically either after her body has been through that. And just something else I noticed, as she really began to give into this craving for raw meat, I just wrote all the internalized fear that Veronica held has now become rage. She wants to consume all that she and her parents have been afraid of. And she's sick of cowering and being afraid. She doesn't want to be like her parents. All that internalized trauma and that repression, she's wanting to just consume, take it all, get vengeance on everybody who has made her feel this way. Any anything before we talk a little bit more about some of
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is something that a lot of women and female presenting people have struggled with, but also I think um, there is an over sexualization of Asian women in particular, and especially for her being already so young. And then on top of that, the over sexualization of Asian women, that it does feel like there is that added level of exoticism that is being laid on her. And like when Michael, I think his name is, when he's then with a girl, she's a white girl, she's not, so it's like, oh well, I had the fun, you know with the Asian, and now I can actually date a white woman. You know, that's a very common experience for people like that. And so yeah, that was definitely an element of all of what was going on as well.
He did have that mentality. And I know, like, at the party, when people, they said to her, you know, you look too young to be here, even though her white best friend was with her. And Veronica, you know, she even thinks, she's like, nobody's saying that to, I forgot her friend's name, but she said because she's white, you know, and she's here and she's got a boyfriend. So nobody's saying this to her. She's pretty, she's white, she's all this. And so everybody is just going to be coming down on, you know, Veronica. Um, and then we talked, I think this might have been before we went on, but how at the restaurant, Veronica is eating, and I hope I'm saying this right, pho Thai. And you're supposed to dip the raw meat into the broth to cook it, but she just starts
She
eating the
just
raw
eats
meat.
it.
Yeah. And her family's like, what? And that she does have that conversation about the Eucharist with them, and the priest is actually with them, and he doesn't seem offended by what's going on at all. Her parents are like, why are you doing, you know, stop doing that. And the priest just seems to be like, okay, you know. Um, he didn't seem bothered by it the way her parents did. Then I wanted to talk about how two in the hallway where she's getting into her locker and this guy elbows her, like kind of shoves her out of the way, and she ends up biting him. And you know, he had like a hamburger or something on his shirt, so she just bit him. And then I like how she also subverted that stereotype that you will hear. You know, people saying that every Asian looks alike, that bullshit. But she flips that on its head, and she talks about how, you know, he's just another guy, and she's like, all these boys and their generic faces, they were all part of a shapeless body. So I really liked how she did that.
Mm.
That also reminded me, you know, of certain guys who kind of put all women into a category. Oh, that's just a woman, you know, that's, you know, just misogyny. But she's like, these generic white boys, you know, who cares about them? They're all shapeless, one person. And then when she gets into the vehicle with the man who apparently is a pedophile, and he's trying to assault her, and she says, my jaw locked around his neck, my teeth digging into his skin. It's like she went all, if you watch The Walking Dead, she was like all Rick Grimes in that one episode, grabbing the jugular, and I was like, you go. But then there was something else about that again. We people may be worried about me and you, Vivian, but something very beautiful in that scene. She says, in my mouth he was broth and stew. And I was like, I love it. I love it. And then she actually really has what I would describe as orgasmic experience when she begins to consume this meat. She experiences orgasm. So it's a very nourishing and pleasurable.
It's a foodgasm. It's a
It
literal
is.
cannibalistic foodgasm.
It is. It is definitely that. And then, of course, Veronica ends up having that interaction with Will, who is Michael, the one who sexually assaulted her, his older brother, Will. And she does find out that Will is the guy that Tommy had been seeing. And so Will is asking Veronica, why won't you leave my brother alone? Why are you bothering Michael? And Veronica finally says it to him. She says, your brother fucked me. It hurt. I didn't want it. And I thought at that time, Veronica does not have Tommy there anymore. She can't tell her older brother what happened, but she can tell somebody else's older brother, even if it's the older brother of the boy who assaulted her. She doesn't have her brother, but she tells somebody else's older brother. And I found that to be a very important part of Veronica coming to terms and not being afraid to say what happened. But it was also sad to me that she had to tell this older brother and she couldn't tell her own anymore. And then, of course, we have the neighbor, who we haven't really talked a lot about, but Veronica has seen him abusing his wife. And he sees her, seeing him, and he tries to kill her. And then May comes out and kills that neighbor and licks the blood. And I know I'm kind of going rapid over this for time's sake, but that's when we find out May's, a very tough woman. Veronica says, "My mother was meek. She was a pious, tiny wisp of a woman, and she had violently shed the blood of two different men. She had eaten human flesh. I was fascinated by her and the way all these truths could exist in one person." So we do find out that her mother was on one of the boats, the fishing boats leaving Vietnam, and got stranded. And there was, she was with a significant other and another man, and they realized that other man was going to try to kill and eat them. So they killed and ate him. And then her mother realized that her partner was going to do that to her. So she did that to him, in order to survive. And so we get this survival, but we also get generational trauma and resilience, really, to me, passed down from May to Veronica. I know I said a lot then. What else can we say, Vivian?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, it's like almost like survivorship that is also kind of passed down, and I like how that was how May was kind of described in that moment of somebody who wasn't gonna just lie down and let it happen to her. She was going to bite the ear of the guy, like she was going to fight back too. And yeah, so it was nice to see it kind of painted as the fact that like Ronnie is this kind of person almost because of her mother, and even though her mother seemed one way to her, there's still those elements that get kind of carried to her.
Yes, that quiet, strength was covering over something very, very viscerally powerful in May, and I think she didn't want to have to do that kind of thing again. That's why she was trying to keep that low profile. But when it came time to have to do something like that, she didn't hesitate. I also noticed something else too, and this is going a little bit back to just culture and home and food. At the beginning, when they're having Tommy's graduation celebration, there's a certain sauce that's being cooked, and Veronica thinks how she hated the smell of that sauce. It made her sick when she was a kid because it was like really strong. But then that day, she says it's not bothering her because it smells like home. And then at the end of the book, whenever May has prepared a favorite dish for the family, and she served it in the white bowls with the blue flowers, she puts it on the table, and then Veronica describes it. She says, "I sipped the soup. It burned my mouth, but the soup was spicy, savory, and warm. It tasted of home." So it kind of wrapped around the novel with the smells of home at the beginning and it being a comforting, safe place. Then at the end, after all the terrible things that have happened, when May and Ba and Veronica sit down to that dinner, it feels like home again. When the dad has apologize. Vivian and I talked about this, and in his only way admitting to, ordering the bad pizza. But again, it was just like, here, here we are home again, despite everything that's happened. And I thought that was a beautiful way to end the book. That this act of eating together is symbolizing the wholeness of the family once again, even though Tommy is not there and, of course, will always be missed. So, any other thoughts? Any final thoughts about the novel or quotes we didn't talk about?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's tough that, and again, Veronica's upset because she said Tommy can never know that about her parents, so she's upset with them for not telling, them before all of it. And that's just something that won't be able to happen. Any other thoughts, Vivian, or quotes that we didn't talk about?
No, I mean, I tagged. I was telling before. I don't normally annotate books. It's just not a thing that I was doing. And then I was reading, and I can't remember what was the first one that I tagged. Let's see. I think it was that the Americans Taste. I was reading that one. And I was like, okay, I can't keep reading this book and not flag these things. And I just ended up flagging so many. But I think for me, it was just. I think it was just a really beautiful discussion of food and culture, but it just happened to involve cannibalism.
I agree. And then, Veronica, like the coming of age aspect, where she talked a couple of times about, seeing her parents. Like, I think a lot of us experience this. We see our parents as one way, and we kind of think they've always been the way they are. And we don't think about their past lives.
Yeah.
She
The
has to
minute
kind of.
you the minute you realize that your parents are humans and people and
Exactly. And she's talking about seeing him in this one person, like what she found out about her dad being, put into the re-education camp in Vietnam. She's like, he existed as that person, and then he's this person I know now, but they're the same person. And, she thinks the same thing with her mom, talking about her mom being tiny and quiet, but her mom's also the woman who has killed and consumed, men. So that's the same person. And there's also one quote I want to talk about as adulthood, because my God, do I, feel this all of the time, pretty much. And I read it to Tim, and he's like, "Yep." I realized this was the bitter taste of adulthood. The numerous ways life could topple over someone, one thing after another, relentless like a flurry of blows. There was no respite from it. The constant aggression of life. We were all at its mercy. We adults, we were expected to just carry on. That's a tough lesson you have to learn when you become an adult, is that you're going to have these things thrown at you, but you have to keep going. So this novel did so much, and it wasn't even that long, but it felt like so much was put into it that we could probably talk for another 2 hours, but we won't do it. So I will go ahead, and if anybody has any other comments while I'm putting up this next banner, please feel free, Vivian, or anybody in the chat. So now we'll get to some read alikes and watch alikes, but I'm gonna hide that other ticker and check the comments. Let's see. I agree. I thought, it ended so beautifully. Like, the trauma is still there, but the family is coping with it in new ways, and finding a new, that ritual of food again to bring them together. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you for being here. So Vivian also, she already mentioned the book, and I did put it in the chat, Purity and Danger, by Mary Douglas, and that's immediately going on to my TBR. Um, some other read-alikes I have, if you're wanting more cannibalism, there is A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. This is more of a woman who does this for pleasure. She's a food critic, and she has a proclivity for preparing delectable dishes made of the men that she consumes. Um, then Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. Again, that's got some feminine rage to it. It's about a mother who had a very wonderful job in art, but she decides to stay home when she has a baby, and she turns quite a bit feral, and develops a taste for raw meat. But it's a really beautiful story that made me cry. There's also a movie, and the movie is pretty good too, but I liked the book better. The Lamb by Lucy Rose, coming of age. It's a bit different, because the young girl in it is an actual child, but it does have to do also with women and cannibalism. And then Bones and All, I thought about that book. It's also a movie. That one is again coming of age, cannibalism. It has, I would say, it has different kinds of cannibalism in it too that Vivian was talking about. And then another read alike is for Feminine Rage, Carrie. There's not really any cannibalism involved in it, but there is a lot of blood. So definitely Feminine Rage, definitely religious trauma, generational conflict. And then the actual read alike, the comp for the book, is Little Fires Everywhere, but I have not read that. But that is what the book was compared to. It was Little Fires Everywhere meets Jennifer's Body. So now we'll get into some watch alikes. Jennifer's Body, of course, Feminine Rage, consumption, consuming of boys, not people, just boys, if you know the movie. And then I thought about the movie Raw, which is another excellent depiction, coming of age and cannibalism. A young woman who finds out that she may have something that has passed down from her once she eats meat. She's a vegetarian, but when she is made to eat meat, and like this kind of hazing thing in a fraternity when she goes away to college, it awakens a part of her. Then I thought about the movie Fresh, which again has to do with cannibalism, and this doesn't unfortunately seem too far-fetched now, but very wealthy people who are just kind of bored with eating the same old kind of meat decide they would like to eat some human meat. And then Yellow Jackets, the television series, that's another coming of age cannibalism. There's a lot when you really start looking into it. And then there's also a movie. Now, a lot of people like it. I wouldn't say that I necessarily like it. I thought, it's kind of, in my opinion, a little cheesy, but there is a movie called Teeth, which has to do with vagina dentata and a girl who's assaulted. And we'll just say some stuff happens when she realizes she has vagina dentata. If you don't know what that is, it's when it's when a lady part has teeth. So there you go. If that sounds interesting to you, then check out Teeth. Also, there's a book I thought about when I started talking about vagina dentata, Queen of Teeth by Haley Piper. So you might want to check that out. Anything that you can think of, Vivian, now that we have
I was remembering I was remembering that I should probably have mentioned one of the big anthropological studies of the grief version of Cannibalism, just because we talked about that one quite a lot. It's called Consuming Grief, and it's by Beth Conklin. I probably should have mentioned that one before, but it was like, as we were going through it, I was like, oh, I should probably have cited that.
I am writing that one down too.
But yeah, so that one is a big detail of the kind of grief version of cannibalism. But in it, she also has a couple of chapters where she goes through the more different versions of cannibalism and some examples and stuff.
So now we have nonfiction.
Nonfiction as well.
We are covered, y'all. Y'all be looking for some cannibalism coming up on my my channels and my Substack. Now it's in my head. Okay, Earthlings. I've heard a lot of people talk about that, and it is on my TBR, but I have not gotten to it yet. So thank
More.
you.
It's just more.
More and more. Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Stina. Thank you so much. For anybody catching us on the replay, thank you. So now we're going to just talk very briefly about some future channel plans. So Vivian, would you like to tell us what you have in store on YouTube and Substack?
Yeah, so I have two YouTube channels. I have Incidental Mythology, which is all the video essays and stuff, but I also have just my name, Vivian Asimos, which is where I do more vlogs, and that's where I kind of focus more on the actual like how I'm doing the research stuff. And I'm currently in the middle of doing a structuralist anthropological study of Dracula. So if you want to know what the hell structuralism is and how one does it and what we can learn from Dracula about our own society, then you can go and check that out. I'm posting it as I do it, so you see the process happen over time. I don't know what's going to come out of this. It might be a whole fat load of nothing at the end. I have no idea. We'll discover it together. So you can check that out. And then I am also in the middle of doing a multi-year long study of the mythology of Taylor Swift. So you can follow along on both channels, because I'm also going to be having some video essays on Taylor Swift, because that's coming out of my ears at this point. And you can also go on the Substack, because I've got so many posts about Taylor Swift and more coming.
Well, this eldest daughter is looking forward to all the Swifty goodness, right? Those of you who've been following me, you know I am a Swifty. If you go way back into my channel, you can find my video where I have a book pairing for every song on the Tortured Poets Department album. Yes, ooh, both albums, all of them.
That's a lot.
You can check that out. That was a passion project for sure. On Substack, I do also have an article about hauntological nostalgia, where I compare a selection of Taylor Swift songs to Gwendolyn Kai's novel, The Haunting of Belkwood. So Swifties everywhere. Then other things, I've got quite a few things planned. I have a lot of ambitious goals since Renna goes back to school tomorrow. We'll see if I have the energy to pull all these off. Currently, we are in the middle of the first annual Ogtober Film Fest. This is going to take place every August, but we love to call it Ogtober. And we're going to be watching all of the movies in different franchises each year. This year, we are watching the Hell House LLC franchise. The first one's really the only good one to me, but the other ones are fun. So be sure you check that out on Discord, and you can get some information on that on Substack too. I want to go ahead and mention the other two books for the Literary Love Book Club this year. We do one book pretty much every 2 months, because the July selection was What Hunger, but here we are in August. Anyway, you probably know how this goes, and I'm rambling, but let me try to get through this. September, the book club selection is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, and I hope I said his name right. The November Literary Love Book Club is a Gothic classic and one of my favorites, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I also have Nocturnal November coming up, which is a readathon and a watchathon and an activity-a-thon where we're going to focus on a particular creature of the night. I am planning some video essays and some fall vlogs, and then finally kicking off officially on August 31st. If you are a paid subscriber to my Substack, the American Haunting course begins. Module 1 kicks off August 31st. So, whew, that's a whirlwind of stuff, and I hope I have the energy to get through it. So, once again, thank you, Vivian, for being here. I want everybody to make sure you go follow and subscribe to Vivian. Give her support because it means a lot to those of us who are doing this kind of stuff and putting ourselves out there. It means a lot to have a community. Anything else you want to add before we go, Vivian?
No, just thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. I was really excited as soon as you asked me. I was like, I looked at the blurb and went, yup, I'm down. And I have seen you around on Substack and the like, so it was just exciting to finally actually be able to meet you in whatever way that was possible. So I'm just really excited to have been here.
I'm excited too. This, I think, might be the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Yes.
So thank you again, everybody who came and stayed this extra time. And thank you to those of you catching this on the replay. I appreciate all of you. I hope you have a wonderful day or night, wherever you may be. And happy reading, everybody. Bye.